Today, we're going to talk about a weapon, but it's not one made of steel. It's made of words. We're diving into a 17th century poem that was really a piece of political propaganda. So powerful, it just might have changed the future of an entire nation. I mean, it's a pretty bold question, right? But back in 1681 England, the answer was, believe it or not, a resounding yes. We're talking about a time when a single piece of writing could actually sway public opinion, completely undermine a rebellion, and lock in the power of a king. So, the secret sauce here, the thing that gave this poem all its power, is that it's an allegory. On the surface, it's telling the super familiar biblical story of King David and his rebellious son Absalom. But every single person reading it back in 1681 knew exactly what was up. They knew it was really about the explosive political crisis that was swallowing their own country and their own king, Charles II. And here it is. This is the poem itself. It was published by a guy named John Dryden, and this wasn't just some work of art for art's sake. No way. It was a deliberate political act, a calculated missile aimed right at the hearts and minds of the English people. So you have to ask, why was a poem so desperately needed? Well, to really get its power, you've got to understand just how chaotic things were. England in 1681 was a nation teetering right on the edge of another brutal civil war. And this was the problem, the single issue that had all of Protestant England terrified. The king didn't have a legitimate heir, and the next guy in line for the throne, his brother James, was a Catholic. Now, for a country that had just fought a horrifyingly bloody civil war over this exact stuff, religion and power, just a few decades earlier, this felt like an existential threat. And, this didn't just happen overnight. After the monarchy was brought back in 1660, all these tensions were just simmering under the surface. And then they finally boiled over into what's called the Exclusion Crisis. Parliament, led by a group that would eventually become the Whigs, tried to pass a law to literally exclude James from ever becoming king. The entire country basically split into two camps. You had the Whigs, fighting for the power of Parliament, and you had the Tories, defending the king's absolute God-given right to rule. I mean, the stakes could not have been higher. This was a fight for the very soul of England. Everybody remembered the horror of the last Civil War, and the one terrifying question on everyone's mind was, is it all about to happen again? So, in this massive war of ideas, the king's side needed a secret weapon, and they found one in arguably the most brilliant literary mind of the entire era. Let me introduce you to John Dryden. This guy wasn't just any poet, he was the poet laureate. He was the historiographer royal. This was the official voice of the court, a literary giant whose words carried incredible weight and authority. See, for Dryden, art didn't just exist in some vacuum. For him, it was a tool. He was actually commissioned by the court to jump into this political war, and he truly believed that poetry's highest purpose was to defend the monarchy and bring a sense of order to a very chaotic world. All right, so how did he do it? How did he pull this off? Let's crack this thing open and really see how Dryden built this absolute masterpiece of persuasion. Dryden's masterstroke, the truly genius part, was choosing this specific Bible story. His readers were deeply religious. They knew this tale of a beloved son's tragic rebellion by heart. So this let him frame what was basically a messy political squabble as a timeless, epic struggle between good and evil, loyalty and treason. It was brilliant. Okay, first up, the king himself. In the poem, King David is the stand-in for King Charles II. But here's the thing. Charles had a bit of a reputation for being, well, lazy and promiscuous. So how do you possibly spin that? And right here, this is where Dryden performs a kind of political magic. He takes the king's well-known promiscuity, the very thing that caused this crisis, and he completely reframes it. It's not a flaw. No, it's vigorous warmth, a godlike generosity, scattering his maker's image. It is an absolutely audacious and just brilliant piece of political spin. So at the heart of this rebellion was Charles's illegitimate but incredibly popular son, the Duke of Monmouth. And in the poem, he becomes the tragic figure of Absalom. But Dryden had a real problem here because the public adored Monmouth, so he couldn't just trash him. Instead, he painted him as this noble but kind of naive figure, a really good man who was just led astray. The strategy was crystal clear. Forgive the misguided son, condemn the rebellion itself, and put all the blame on the guy who was whispering in his ear. And that man, the true villain of the poem, is Achitophel, a direct, unmistakable allegory for the Earl of Shaftesbury, the brilliant and powerful leader of the Whig Party and the main architect of the whole exclusion crisis. This portrait of him is just devastating. Dryden is so clever here. He doesn't portray Shaftesbury as an idiot, he does the exact opposite. He admits he's a genius, sagacious, bold, and turbulent of wit, which only makes his crooked counsels all the more sinister and dangerous. He's basically a satanic tempter, and Dryden's poetry is the weapon to defeat him. And get this, the attack wasn't just on these three main guys. Dryden created a role for nearly everyone in the political drama of 1681, mapping the entire English political landscape onto this one biblical story. It was basically a comprehensive and devastatingly effective political cartoon, but in verse. Now, Dryden's weapon wasn't just his story, it was his style. He used something called the heroic couplet, which is a poetic form famous for its balance, its order, and its control. So the very structure of his poetry was itself a political statement, mirroring the monarchical stability he was defending against the chaos of rebellion. Just listen to how these two lines work together, that perfect rhyme and that steady rhythm. It creates this self-contained, totally memorable package. It delivers a sharp analytical job that's somehow both elegant and absolutely deadly. The form itself reinforces the message. So, did it work? What was the ultimate impact of this massive literary assault? Oh yeah, the poem was a huge success, a massive victory for the Tories and the king. It helped completely turn public opinion against Shaftesbury and the Whigs, framing them not just as political opponents, but as enemies of divine and natural order itself. It cemented Dryden's legacy forever, and it's still one of history's greatest examples of art being used as a political weapon. And all this brings us right back to our first question. A single poem once had the power to literally intervene in a national crisis. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own age of memes and viral videos and the 24-hour news cycle, what's our modern equivalent? What's the art that shapes our politics today?